In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Good evening and welcome to Strange Bedfellows, episode 33. I'm your host, Lori Spencer. My friend and fellow Austinite Russell, Texas Bentley, has been missing since April 8th. Despite rumors and speculation about his mysterious disappearance, Russell's fate is still a mystery. On the day he went missing, Russell and his wife Lyudmila had been in line at a local government building in Donetsk to deal with some administrative documents when he went to go help civilians injured in a nearby attack by Ukrainian forces. But when his wife went looking for him, she only found his car with his baseball cap, glasses, and his phone, which was shattered. On April 16th, his wife wrote on Russell's Telegram account that she had received, quote, reliable and confirmed ironclad information that her husband was kidnapped and continues to be illegally detained by the tankers of the 5th Brigade of the Russian Federation Armed Forces. She pleaded with Russell's friends and supporters to appeal urgently to the governments of the Donetsk People's Republic and Russia, the FSB, the Prosecutor General's Office, and the Ministries of Defense and Internal Affairs to help her locate her husband, adding, quote, perhaps there is not much time. His wife posted again on Thursday, April 18th, quote, today is the 10th day since Russell disappeared. To this day, I do not know his whereabouts, she said. On Friday, reports began to emerge that seemingly confirmed our worst fears. Sputnik, who employed Russell as a war correspondent, released a statement written by Margarita Simonyan, head of Russia Today TV, stating that Russell, call sign Texas, was dead. Russell's former combat unit, the Vostok Battalion, and a local official in Donetsk also confirmed his death yesterday, adding that their information came from Russell's wife. The U.S. State Department has not confirmed this information, however. In a statement Friday, a State Department spokesman said, quote, we are aware of reports of a U.S. citizen missing in the Donetsk region in Ukraine. Our ability to verify reports of incidents regarding U.S. citizens in Ukraine is extremely limited, unquote. The mystery deepened when Russell's wife and some of his friends spoke out today, saying that they could not and would not confirm that he was in fact deceased. Our Maverick News correspondent in Crimea, Kevin Michalitzi, is a personal friend of the Bentleys and told us this morning he was furious about the premature reports of Russell's demise, adding that most of what we've been told in the West is fake news.
A week ago, people were saying his body was found dead and decapitated. That was fake. Then it was like, oh, his body was found, which was fake as well. So let me tell you what I know. I know exactly what Lyudmila says on Russell's Telegram channel or in her own words when I talk to her. So at 9:15 p.m., a couple of hours after Margarita Simonyan posted her message, Lyudmila posted this on Russell's Telegram channel and his VK account. Holy Russia, keep the Orthodox faith, for in it you are confirmed and saved. I being Lyudmila, was at the Military Investigative Committee. Details later. How much later? That will depend on the professionalism of the investigating authorities. All reliable information is found only on Russell's channel here being Telegram, and on his VK page. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the Military Investigative Committee is investigating. Nowhere does she say that he was found dead. Nowhere is that confirmed. So everything you're hearing out there, whether it's from, Margarita Simonyan, you find it on the Sputnik Telegram channel, even Telegram channels like, Slavengrad and Calibrated, all these guys who are usually pretty thorough on checking things out. None of them have looked into this. Now, I've seen in comments under a lot of these posts, oh, he was killed by the Ukrainians. Oh, the Russians killed him. Oh, what does Lyudmila know? Well, I can tell you that Lyudmila and the people around her in Donetsk know a lot more than you think they know. And, I can tell you for a fact that I've spoken to Lyudmila. I've spoken to some regional heads who have moved it up the government chain. I've spoken to Duma members who've moved it over into the military chain and down the government chain. And nobody is confirming anything about anything. Nobody knows what's going on right at the moment. So your only source of information is Russell's Telegram channel. So quit listening to other sources except his VK page or his Telegram channel. And if I hear anything different from Lyudmila by text message or personal conversation with her, I will honor her wishes as to if that information should be released or not. And I can pretty much tell you she will say no unless she posts it to Russell's Telegram channel over here. So quit asking me. No, it is not confirmed. No, Lyudmila did not confirm it. No, Sputnik did not confirm it. And the RT managing editor has zero proof as well. So all these people with no proof are spreading a big story, and it pisses me off because it wastes my time. So don't ask me again. Look at this video. And if you don't believe me, then follow Russell's Telegram channel or his VK channel and wait to hear it from Lyudmila herself. That's all I have to say on this issue.
This afternoon, Russell's wife, Lyudmila, posted on Russell's official Telegram channel that, quote, "I have not seen him alive, nor his body, nor his remains. That's a fact. And yes, there is some insider information that is very not good." She thanked the Vagner group guys for finding out what happened, how that happened, who they were, how many of them there were, and their motive. "I still hope for real operational professionalism and decency from all involved agencies," she said. Since leaving his home in Austin, Texas, 10 years ago to volunteer for the Russian armed forces against what he called the Nazis in Ukraine, Russell was willing to lay down his life for a cause he believed in, the struggle against fascism. Even though Russell had aged out of the armed forces a few years ago, he was still not afraid to put himself in dangerous situations, often running directly towards active combat zones to cover battles as a journalist, or to provide first aid to civilians injured by the constant shelling in Donetsk, as he did in the moments before his mysterious disappearance on April 8th. In an interview exactly 1 month before he vanished, Russell told journalist Patrick Henningsen on TNT Radio that Donetsk was swiftly becoming a hot zone of combat activity once again, as NATO soldiers were infiltrating the area, which may provide some clues as to his violent kidnapping and perhaps his murder.
Tell us what life is like in Donetsk on this front. I think it's important that people know and understand what the threat is for normal residents living in this area. Go ahead, Russell.
It's It's dangerous in Donetsk. For most of the last almost 9 years, since 2014, the center of the city was relatively safe. The districts that were closer to the front, and people have to understand that until basically the fall, the liberation of Avdiivka within the last month, the Ukrainian military front lines were on the city limits of the city of Donetsk, which is a fairly large city. It's about 1 million people, where it was before the war. There's probably 600,000 or 700,000 now. There's another small city, or the next biggest city is called Makiivka. It's basically in the same urban agglomeration with about 500,000 people. And the front lines have been the city limits. I mean, even from right now where I sit in the center of Donetsk, it's less than 10 miles to Ukrainian military positions. And heavy artillery can go 15 miles. You know, the drones can go 12, 15 miles too. And closer to the front, it's even more dangerous. And when you have a significant occasion, like say the last few years, the biggest holiday in Russian culture, in modern Russian culture, is the Victory Day, the 9th of May, when the German Nazis signed the surrender in the Second World War. And there were years when we had big parades down the main street of Donetsk. And since the special military operations started, we don't have them at all, because they would be targeted. Absolutely. There was a female artillery commander a couple of years ago in 2022. She was killed at the front in combat, and they had a funeral for her at the Donetsk Opera Theater, which is the same place where they had the funeral for Alexander Zaharchenko, for Givy, for Motorola. And this woman whose call sign was Corsa was having her funeral there, and they bombed it. They bombed the artillery, the opera theater. They bombed the central area. And so we can't, we expect that there's going to be it's going to be dangerous to go vote when the election, when the voting days come up here. It's going to be dangerous. It's dangerous to go outside. In particular, again, I say in the frontline areas, but even in the center of the city, they tried to bomb a HIMARS, which HIMARS are operated by NATO soldiers, probably Americans. They're not operated by Ukrainians. And less than 2 weeks ago, a HIMARS rocket was shot at our main central library in the center of Donetsk, and it missed by about 2 meters. And it was, you really have to believe in guardian angels and the hand of God, because it was a penetrator round. It was set to go through the roof. And, the main library is like 3 stories tall. It's about 100 years old. It's, shall we say, massive architecture, really regal, a beautiful building, historic building, millions of books. And this thing was intending to hit the library, go through the first and second floor, and then blow up and burn the books and destroy the building. It missed. It hit the street. There was people at a bus stop just a few yards away. There's people driving by just a few yards away. But since it was set to penetrate, it blew up underground, and the shrapnel didn't slaughter all the people standing around. It was very lucky that it didn't hit the building, and it didn't kill a bunch of people.
So even the act of going to the library, or going out to vote on polling day, potentially some residents would be taking their life into their own hands by just doing what most people would take for granted, Russell, in other parts of the world as their civic duty, as their day-to-day activity. All of these things become risky in an environment, and this is targeting civilian areas indiscriminately, consistently over, as you say, better part of 9 years. This is a war crime.
Not even indiscriminately. Right now we live in the center of the city in an apartment because our house in Petrovsky is under constant shelling. Our house has not been hit directly, but it's been damaged 3 times from artillery shells that have landed within 100 yards. Now, we've had neighbors killed on the next street over, and basically shells have hit in every direction around our house. So when I go to Petrovsky to check on the house, feed the cat, check on the neighbors, my wife stays here in the center. And when I go out the door, we say a prayer, she kisses me goodbye like it might. I take my credit card, my bank card out of my wallet and give it to her in case I don't come back. But when I go to Petrovsky, sometimes when I'm driving back from the front line districts, I get up on a hill and I can see pillars of smoke coming from the center. So, I kiss her goodbye, hoping that I'll see her again, just the same as she does me.
At this point, it is probably safe to say we won't be seeing our old friend, the Donbass cowboy, again. Who killed Russell Bentley? Was it the Ukrainians who had his name on their infamous kill list? Was it the DPR who reportedly suspected him of being a NATO spy? Was it pro-Ukrainian Russian werewolves who had a personal score to settle? Or perhaps a shadowy NATO Special Forces unit who black-bagged him? We may never know. All we do know for sure is that Russell Texas Bentley's life and his ultimate sacrifice was not in vain. Those of us who knew and loved him will miss his war stories, his guitar picking, his wry wit, and his encyclopedic knowledge of history. Although Russell and I were on opposite sides of the political spectrum, truly strange bedfellows, I'm a libertarian, he was a communist, we shared much in common: a deep love for our native Texas, our musical tastes, our cannabis activism, and our mutual hatred of fascism. Tonight, episode 33 of Strange Bedfellows is a tribute to my friend Russell. As today is 4/20, the annual marijuana holiday, I couldn't think of a more appropriate time to bring you some selected highlights from my last interview with Russell on July 14th, 2023. Here, he'll tell you his fascinating life story in his own words. If you never had the pleasure of getting to know Russell Texas Bentley, maybe tonight's show will make you wish you had. And if you did know Tejas, this incredible conversation will serve as a remembrance of the beautiful human being we have apparently lost to the horrors of war.
Do you know how lucky we are to be alive right here, right now? Where we are able to choose our own path and how we will walk it, even if the destination for all of us is ultimately the same. But we do get to decide what we will do with our lives while we are here, what our life will mean, and what we will leave behind. We do not get to choose our circumstances. We do not get to choose the world that we are born into. But it is up to us alone to decide how we will deal with it. We have the free will to choose the meaning we will impart to our brief journey through this world, to choose our allies and our adversaries, and the principles we will base our life on, or not. History abounds with clear examples of both the greatest good and the most inhuman evil. And each of us will decide, through action or inaction, which side we will be on, and how God and history will judge us. And in the end, it does not matter whether or not you believe in God or the devil, or whether or not they even exist. Because good and evil do exist, and the right way to live is the same either way. Those who allow themselves to be enslaved by evil, either willingly or through passive submission, will be devoured by it. That is always their inevitable end. But those guided by love, mercy, kindness, and compassion, the virtues extolled by all great religions, the virtues that truly make us human, can only be pleasing in the eyes of God, by whatever name he may be called. But even if there is no God, if our lives are of no more significance than an ant or a rock, even if there is nothing before or after this brief sentient experience, even if life is devoid of any higher meaning, nothing more than what we experience while we are here, then what greater goal in life can there be than to make it as good as possible for all of us and for those who come after? If this is all there is, let's make it the best we can for ourselves and all who share our fate together while we are alive today. So either way, God or no God, judgment or no judgment, the right way for us all to live is still the same: to make the world a better place for all of us, for every single one of us here. When you were young, 7, 8, 9 years old, what did you dream you would become? Whatever it was, didn't it involve more than money or fame? Didn't it include challenge, heroism, some kind of altruistic meaning? Every life has the opportunity to be beautiful, heroic, meaningful. There is a true joy that can only be known by being heroic, by sacrifice, by helping others with no thought of reward. And even someone who has nothing can do it. It is not your circumstances in life that define who you are. It is how you deal with them that determines what your life really means. This is your opportunity, your one chance for you yourself to define who you are, what this life will mean, and to prove it, not by words and pretense, but by your actions. Times are tough these days, and they are bound to get tougher. But whatever happens, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. We are all going to die. Accept that. There is no justice but the justice we make with our own hands, with our own hearts and our own minds. Accept that. Fear is the mind destroyer, the soul crusher. All of your enemies want you to be afraid. So do not be afraid. Don't give them that. It is impossible to be happy when you are afraid. All of your friends and all of those who love you, even those you do not know, want you to be fearless because they want you to be happy. Even if you face the gallows in the morning, be fearless, and you have won. Your life is your own legend to write and to live. It is your one chance to truly be a hero. Take it. What more could you ask for than that? It is the example that you will leave for all who come after, even if they never knew you or even heard of you. Everything we do in this life reverberates around the world and out into the universe forever. Never give up. Never sell out. Never surrender your honor and humanity. Do not be afraid. Live your life like a legend. Live your life like a hero. Even if you are the only one who sees or knows it, that is enough. Everything we do in this life, every single thing, makes a difference, for good or for evil. It is all that we leave behind, and it is all that we can take with us. In the end, we are what we do. Davai.
I'll tell you a little bit more about him if you've never heard about Russell. He was born in Texas in 1960, served in the U.S. Army in the 1980s. And, he just always had an interest in politics and history. And after the Maidan coup in Kiev in 2014, and then the subsequent war that erupted, particularly, I think it was the Odessa massacre that motivated Russell to do something. Even though he was an American, he was sitting over here in the United States watching all this unfold on television and said, these people are Nazis. They're butchering these innocent Russian people. I have to do something. And so he traveled there and he signed up to join the fight on the side of the Russian separatists. So it's a really fascinating story. He has been living in Donetsk, I believe, since 2014, and he fought in the defense forces of the Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR. After serving a year in the Vostok Battalion and the Spetsnaz Battalion, he made the transition to war correspondent and human aid volunteer, which is what he does now. I believe he is now retired from the battlefield. But he's here with us tonight on Strange Bedfellows, and I am pleased to welcome our friend Russell Texas Bentley. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Lauren.
It's great to have you.
Glad
What
to be
time
here.
is it over there in Donetsk?
Well, it just turned about 3 o'clock in the morning here, Saturday night. So
The witching hour.
Well, B.B. King wrote a song about 3 o'clock in the morning.
He did.
It's a good one too. So
a
I think I'll be able to stay up for the next couple hours to talk to you.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. And the way we usually start out the show on Strange Bedfellows, because it's a show about political opposites who agree more than they disagree. I'm a libertarian, longtime libertarian. I guess these days you'd call me a Kennedy libertarian because I'm working on the campaign of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., trying to get him elected president. And of course, you're a communist. And I have many friends who are communists, and we frequently have them here on the program. So I like to start out just by learning a little bit about you and your journey politically. When you were growing up, I guess you were born in Texas. Were you born in Austin or Brownsville?
That's right. I was born in Austin, Texas on 38th Street at the, whatever, I can't even remember the name of the hospital, but right there on 38th and I-35.
Oh, Brackenridge Hospital.
Brackenridge, that's right.
Yep, Austin was my hometown for 25 years, a big chunk of my life. So we have that in common. And I think we have a lot of friends in common down there in Austin. So, there was always a community there that I recall when I was in Austin of communists. People think of Texas as this conservative red state, but there was always, particularly in Austin, we call it a blue city in a red state. It's always been very
Yeah.
liberal, but there was a strong community of socialists and communists there.
That's right. Politically aware people. It's I'm very, very proud to be from Austin, Texas. I can tell you that when I came here in December of 2014, I met a guy here the day after I got here who had been born in Moscow. It was a Russian family. His family moved to the United States in about the year 2000, something like that, late 90s maybe. And they moved to Austin, Texas. And so there's two guys that grew up in the United States that have fought on the good guy's side in this war. And they were both
Wow.
spent time from Austin, Texas.
How strange is that? Isn't it great when a Texan meets another Texan? I know when I travel, anywhere I go, somehow we find each other. It's like a magnetic
it was really amazing
pull.
because I was in the Sparta Battalion recruitment office, and I didn't hardly speak any Russian at all. I was there by myself. I'm there with like maybe 25, 30 other dudes. The sergeant comes in. He speaks for like 15 minutes in Russian. I don't understand a word of it. And then from the back of the room, I hear this guy say in English, Javier, I'll tell you what he just said here in a minute. I'll translate for you. And I went over and I said, hey, can you translate for me too? And I had like some old work clothes on, from, some old Carhartts, maybe little holes in them, kind of worn out, stuff like that, work clothes. And this guy asked me, he says, you're not Russian? And I'm like, no. And he's like, where are you from? I'm like, from the States. He's like, what state? And I'm like, I'm from Texas. He's like, me too. And then comes, what town? Austin. Oh, I'm from Austin too.
Get out of here. No way.
And so, we gave a big hug and like all the guys are clapping. It was,
wow.
It was straight out of a movie or something. It was quite amazing crazy situation.
Well, I wanted to shift gears and talk about the here and the now, or recent events that have occurred with the Vagner group revolt, and your thoughts on that, because you had a really interesting take on Vagner. I know you've interacted with those guys somewhat. And what are your thoughts on what Prigozhin did? What was he thinking?
Well, first of all, yes, I do have several friends that are in Wagner. And by several, I mean more than I can count on one hand. A couple of them are officers. They're guys that I fought with back in 2014 and 15. One of the things that makes Wagner such an excellent military unit is that they have a lot of veterans from the Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic, that have been, that have 8 years of experience in combat, and the people that can be in a war for 8 years and still be alive, you can pretty much take for advantage that they know what they're doing. And so I have multiple friends in Wagner right now. It's funny that, people, they say, oh, Prigozhin and Wagner and, oh, the mutiny, the revolt and la, la, la. But, Prigozhin and first of all, I'll say this, Prigozhin didn't make the call to go to Rostov. He said it was a council of commanders. He asked, because he's a very courageous dude. He spent a lot of time on the very front in Bakhmut with his men, but he's not really a combat commander. He's more like, the economic and political leader of Wagner, the ideological leader, Mm-hmm. And so his combat commanders, he asked them, what to do when Shoigu gave the ultimatum about everybody had to sign a contract with the MOD by the end of June.
Right.
And as he said, and I believe, his commanders are the ones who said, we're not going to stand for this. We're not signing it. And we're not, just going to disband and let dissolve all the work that we've done over all these years. And so, so that's the first point. It wasn't Prigozhin that made that decision. It was the combat commanders, pretty much, who all of them, are heroes of Russia. They have the Gold Star. They're, the best military commanders in the whole Russian military, without question, proven by their accomplishments. And then what they did, the FSB, which is like the Russian FBI, they investigated Wagner. They investigated Prigozhin personally. And they said we've opened a specific case on the charge of treason. And the next day, like the 26th of June, they said, no, we closed the case. There's no evidence of treason. That's against Prigozhin and Wagner. You think Alexander Lukashenko, one of the certainly smartest and adept at self-preservation head of state in the world today, he invites, Prigozhin and Wagner into Belarus. And Lukashenko has had several attempts at color revolutions against him in Belarus already. And they were pretty serious, pretty dangerous attacks, which he overcame. But if there was any question about the loyalty of Prigozhin and the soldiers of Wagner, Lukashenko, that's the last thing he would need, would be for, some questionable military unit to come in. And so by Lukashenko inviting them into Belarus, that shows that he is literally trusting Wagner and Prigozhin with his life. And it don't get, it's like mountain climbing, and who's going to hold the rope while you're, over the 500-foot cliff. You're trusting somebody with your life. That's as real as trust can get. On the other hand, Vladimir Putin has said that, betrayal is the worst crime of all. And I agree with that. But if Putin thought that Prigozhin had betrayed him, had tried to attack him as the president of Russia or overthrow the Russian government or the Russian constitution, Putin would never have let Prigozhin get away. He would have said, no, I don't care if you go to Belarus. I don't care if you go to the United States. We're going to get you. We're going to get you.
Right. Yeah, that's the question I have now, is that we find out from Lukashenko this week that actually Prigozhin is not in Belarus. He's apparently in St. Petersburg, Russia. So
that's where he's from. He's taking care of his business. He is not. He's got, the FSB searched his house. They took some guns from his house. They took about $250 million worth of rubles.
And I saw some fat stacks of cash in United States dollars, too.
That's right. That was a big chunk of money. But
it was interesting.
He's got a lot of work to do. Money's a tool. And so he had a lot of that tool. But he's got it all back. He got it all back. He got all the guns back. He got all the money back. So there's no charges against him or Wagner. And he's basically free to do whatever he wants. He's walking around St. Petersburg. He's walking around Rostov. He's walking wherever he needs to go, and nobody's messing with him, because it would be stupid. It would be inexcusably idiotic for Russia to disband, the most effective military unit, in the 21st century. You know, I mean, so they have a powerful thing there. Lukashenko is going to take care of it. I believe, and who knows, really, nobody knows for sure what's going to happen, but I believe that Wagner will make the transition to Belarus. They will become trainers. They will also remain a cohesive military unit, and they will, you know, and they will be 100 kilometers from Kiev instead of 300 kilometers now. And if they're needed to go in, well, when they're needed to go in, they go in. That's what they do. I mean, what they did in Bakhmut or Artemyevsk, it was a legendary military victory for the ages. I mean, you know, there's basic, there's a how do you say it? There's a course of study called military science, and there are laws in military science, just like there are laws in physics, just like the law of gravity, just like the sun comes up in the morning. And you know, one of those laws of military science is that when you are assaulting an entrenched defensive force, particularly in a built-up urban area like Bakhmut, that you need 3 times as many attackers as there are defenders in order to have some, reasonable expectation of success. And the less it is than 3 times as many, scientifically, the less you can expect to have success for the assault. Wagner went into Bakhmut not with 3 times as many, not with twice as many, not even 1-to-1. Wagner went into Bakhmut with less than 1-to-1 parity with the Ukrainian Nazis that were dug in there, and they beat them. Prigozhin says it was 20,000 men that he lost. It would have been less, supposedly, if he'd had the ammo and the equipment that he needed that he didn't get. But to take a city like Bakhmut with less than 1-to-1, that's literally, the Alamo or Thermopylae with the 300 Spartans, except they won. It's like the Alamo fighting against 3,000 Mexican soldiers and winning.
Right.
So it's a miracle of courage, dedication, determination, and they did it. There's no finer fighting for, and the most important thing, and it doesn't matter, if you have, a Stinger missile or if you have a knife. The guy that's the most determined, the guy that's not going to ever, that's going to fight down till, scratching with fingernails. Those are the guys that are going to win. Morale, esprit de corps, that's the most important consideration in any battle. And that's how Wagner won in Bakhmut. They had courage, they had determination, they had the willingness to give their lives to win. And they did win. And they got stabbed in the back for doing it, there's a lot of questions about what's happened with Wagner, between Wagner and Prigozhin and Shoigu, since back in the days of Syria, the original fight there, Deir ez-Zor, 2018. Prigozhin told about, he came out publicly at the beginning of June with the story about Deir ez-Zor, where 200 Wagner soldiers were ambushed by American air power and massacred, basically. One of my friends was there. He was one of the very, very few people that survived that attack. He was there as a soldier in Wagner in Syria and Deir ez-Zor. And Prigozhin said that before they went on this mission to the Conoco refinery outside of Deir ez-Zor, Syria, that they were ordered to take by the Ministry of Defense, the Russian Ministry of Defense. And the Ministry of Defense told them that, yes, we're going to give you air cover. We're going to, turn on the air defense artillery, the S-300s or S-200s, whatever they had there. And, and we're going to put helicopters and fighters in the air. And if any kind of aircraft come to attack you, we're going to protect you. And then as soon as these guys, it was, like a long, 10-kilometer, 20-kilometer march or something. They left in the evening, 6 p.m., something like that. They didn't arrive to their target until midnight, something like that. And as soon as they left, the Ministry of Defense called back and they said, don't put the aircraft in the air. Don't turn on the air defense. And don't tell Wagner that we didn't do it. And I don't know if this is true or not. I know it's true that Prigozhin reported on this in early June. But I also know it's true that in Russia, there's a law against discrediting the Russian military by making false statements that make the Russian military look bad. So, exactly. I mean, there's people in jail in Russia who said something like, say, the Russian army killed all those civilians in Bucha, which is a complete lie. And they wrote it, they publicized it, and they got put in jail for it, as they should, because it's a lie, a provable false lie. So Prigozhin says this about Shoigu, and he went on to say that like a couple of months later, he met Shoigu at some big fancy function in Moscow, and he tried to ask him about it, and Shoigu basically told him, tough darts, little ranger. And so if Prigozhin said it, which he did, then it's either true or it's either a lie. And if it's a lie, then he should be, and no one will argue, he should be arrested for that, for telling a lie, that Shoigu betrayed and stabbed in the back his men, did something that led to the death of scores, if not hundreds, of Russian volunteers. And so if he said it and it was not true, he should have been arrested for it the next day. And he wasn't.
Right. And I saw a report on RT a few days ago. It was on July 5th. And their top story was, the imminent attack on that nuclear power plant. RT was reporting to their people that, this is going to happen today. And then it didn't. And I know that you have some questions yourself about RT and some of the Russian media about its trustworthiness as well. We know the Western press can't be trusted, but what are your feelings on the Russian media and how accurate do you think their reporting is on the war?
Well, I have several friends that work for RT.
Me too.
And
everybody misses the story sometimes, but
yeah, of course. But generally the bigger things are more, politically, socially, like informationally, economically, the more like pro-Western they are. I mean, there's, really, there's two different parts of Russia. There's St. Pete and Moscow, and then everything else, and, I've been to Moscow a lot of times. I've been to St. Pete. I've been to Grozny. I've been around Russia a pretty fair amount. And it's a whole different world in Donetsk than it is,
Oh,
in Moscow or
definitely.
St. Pete or, even Rostov.
Mhm.
And Rostov's a pretty cool town too. I've been there a lot of times. I like it. It's a tough town. It's like the Russian version of Houston.
Interesting. I understand it's basically just one big military base, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's
No?
it's a major city, well over 1 million people in just the city, and then they're like the metroplex around it. It's I mean, it's a historic city. I mean, it's
Mhm.
well, it's older than the United States. It's been around for a long time. It's a tough city. I mean, as far as like gangster cities, they say that Odessa Mama, Rostov Papa.
Hmm.
And, Odessa has also been known for centuries as like, kind of like, Marseille in France, it's like or Rotterdam, I mean, it's one of those port cities where a lot of shady stuff goes on. Shanghai would be another example. And so Rostov's a tough city, but I like it very much. But when it comes to Moscow or St. Pete, you see too many dudes driving around in $500,000 Mercedes. You see their girlfriends driving around the traditional car for the mistress of a Russian oligarch is a Bentley.
Hmm.
So, you see these chicks driving around, not just driving around, they like to park, like right in one of the lanes of the street. They just park in the lane and make a traffic jam for, a couple hours while they go in and get some, Botox for their lips or something. And they drive Bentleys, I mean, so,
Yeah.
It seems to me that the real war that's going on, I mean, beyond anything about, Nazis and like that, which is real also. I mean, there's real Nazis here, real Heil Hitler
Oh,
Nazis,
yeah.
torturing, murdering.
And they've been there
bastards
for
that,
100 years, long before anybody ever heard of Adolf Hitler or the Nazi Party. The Ukrainian nationalists, as I often say, were the OG Nazis, the original gangsters.
That's a fact. I mean, where I am right now in Donetsk, this is Donbass. This is the area, the Ukrainian, Southern Russian area, the Donbass, the Don River Basin. This is the area where a lot of the original Russian Revolution was fought.
Mm-hmm.
This is the area where the Russian Civil War was fought.
Very historic
which,
ground.
Had, was horrific atrocities and stuff. The White Russians against the Red Bolsheviks, which, a lot of people have no clue that, you ask somebody, well, did the United States ever invade Russia?
Yes.
Yeah, they did.
We certainly
They
did.
The United States, France, Japan, England sent 50,000 troops
The
during the Russian
Expeditionary
Civil War
Force, right?
100 years ago, like
That's right.
1921.
Mm-hmm.
And 50,000 troops on the side of the whites. They did a lot of atrocities. They did a lot of fighting here. And so, this land.
Even then,
also,
we were trying to affect regime change, basically. We were
exactly.
trying to,
Even back
get
then,
rid of the
100 years ago.
Bolshevik government.
And when the German Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, they occupied the city. Donetsk was then called Stalino.
Mm-hmm.
And the German Nazis occupied it for 700 days. That's less than 2 years. And in less than 2 years, they murdered over 100,000 citizens of this city in less than 2 years. There's a place about 1 kilometer from where I'm sitting right now. It's called the 4-4 Mine. It was a coal mine shaft. It was 5 by 3 meters. across, and it was 365 meters deep, which is more than 1,000 feet deep. And that was the disposal place for the German Nazis for their victims in the city of Donetsk when they occupied it. More than 75,000 people were thrown down this hole. It was 365 meters deep when the Germans came, and when they left, it was 65 meters deep. And the other 300 meters, which is 1,000 feet, was filled up by human bodies. They threw, whole families at a time down this hole. And so these are the people, and the people that we're fighting today, defending ourselves against today, are the people that say Heil Hitler and Slava Bandera and think that that was cool and want to do that again.
And they want to do it again. They're very clear about that. And, I do want to dig into the history of all this a bit more, because a lot of people in the West don't understand geographically and ideologically how divided Ukraine has been for more than a century now. That, Western Ukraine has always been that hotbed of Ukrainian nationalism, Nazism, because of their history with Poland and Germany during the First World War, in the interwar years, the 20s, the 30s, and then, of course, when they came together in World War II. After World War II, of course, we know that the Banderites, the OUN, the UPA, got in bed with the CIA and MI6, and they were used essentially to wage guerrilla warfare against the Soviet Union. So in many ways, that Western regime change objective has not changed in 100 years. We had a couple of brief respites where we were more friendly with the Soviets. Certainly we were allies for a brief time during World War II. But as soon as that war was over, Winston Churchill just couldn't wait to invade Russia. He had that crazy plan called Operation Unthinkable. I don't know if you're aware of that.
George Patton, too, was a big fan of the idea of fighting. My grandfather was in Patton's Third Army. He was a tank commander. He was one of the first Americans into Germany from the Western side. And he hated Patton, by the way. But
I think most of his own men hated Patton.
you have a very good understanding of the history of Ukraine, and the Donbass, that most Americans would have no clue about, but that's right. That is a fact that the OUN, that from before, they were waiting for the German Nazis to come in. These are the ones, and there's photos of it, the girls giving flowers to the German Nazis, offering the bread and salt, on the towel. And, and the worst war criminals. It's funny, the German term Schweinhund, which means pig dog. The Germans made that up about the Ukrainians because they have these hats with these weird little triangular things on the brim.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And they called them pig dogs. They said it was like pig ears or something. Even the SS thought these dudes were too much.
That's true. That is very, very true. And Hitler was using them. There was never any promise made of Ukrainian independence, but that's the reason that the Banderites and the Ukrainian nationalists were supposedly allied with Hitler. They believed that once the war was won, and the Nazis did kind of dangle that carrot in front of them.
Sure, but only an idiot believes, trusts.
But why would you believe Hitler? Exactly.
Yeah.
The man who never kept a promise.
And again, in that same statement, it applies to, the Russian foreign ministry these days. Why did they believe when NATO said, "Oh, we're not going to expand 1 inch eastward"? Why did they believe when, the Minsk I agreement, the Minsk II agreement? Why did they, a couple of weeks ago when the African presidents came to visit Moscow, and Putin showed the treaty, that supposedly was signed back in March of 2022, where, the security agreements were made. The Ukrainians signed it. The Russians signed it. The Russians moved back from near Kiev, from Bucha, and it's based on this agreement. And as soon as they did, Boris Johnson came and said, no, we're not agreeing to that. And they threw it right out the window. How many, it's like the old Charlie Brown, where he goes to kick the football and Lucy's holding the football. And every time he comes to kick it, she moves it and he lands on his back. How many times?
Many times.
And and it's like so many things. At some point, you can't really say, oh, they're so stupid. You can't say they're stupid anymore, because when they do the same thing and get the same result every time, it's not that they're stupid, it's that they're doing it on purpose.
Well, that's very interesting, Russell, because I've long had a question about this, and I've posed this same question to a lot of different guests on the show, including the Russian ambassador to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky. I've asked Scott Ritter about it. I've asked Kevin Michelizzi about it, asked John Mark Dugan about it, and I want to ask you too. It seems to me, and especially I want to ask you, because you really know your Soviet history. And during the Soviet Union years, post-World War II, during the Cold War, the Khrushchev years, and I guess, later you could maybe lay some blame on Brezhnev for not dealing with this Ukrainian Nazi problem. I mean, they got Bandera, KGB assassinated him in Munich in 1959.
In Munich, yes.
And yes, they were able to capture and imprison many of them, but still, Khrushchev gave Crimea back, or gave Crimea to Ukraine. Khrushchev himself was Ukrainian.
He lived here. He lived in Donetsk. He lived in Petrovsky district. In our house, and near where our house is.
No kidding. Wow.
He was a coal miner.
Yeah.
In Donetsk.
That's right. So I was curious to get your thoughts on that. It's where and how and why the Soviet Union and then later the Russian Federation failed time and time again to deal with this problem on their doorstep for 60 years.
They
and
worked very hard to deal with it. First of all, I mean, in the 10 years after, the end of the Second World War, when the OUN and OPA were still active in the woods around, like that. I mean, I think they killed like 100,000
got a lot of them.
Nazi rebels, I mean, and these guys, they really were the worst. I mean, besides maybe some of the Japanese, but, the Ukrainian auxiliary units were among the very, very worst of the war criminals of the whole Second World War. I mean, the things they did, normal people can't even imagine, and don't want to hear about, and I mean, and it's beyond question. I mean, there's photographs, there's historical documents beyond any question about what they did. And so, I mean, and that's the thing, I mean, like talking about like recent news, just the most horrific and tragic thing. Today I just saw that Erdogan in Turkey has released all those Azov bastards that were supposed to be held in Turkey till the end of the hostilities.
Supposed to be. And, so what happened there?
Well, I can tell you what happened is the Russian diplomats got ass rammed, right there in public, and I got to say that as bad as, we're not, let me put it like this, as incompetent as the military situation has been dealt with by the Russian Federation, Ministry of Defense, over the course of the special military operation, and before that too. Okay, so as incompetent as that has been done, as many egregious mistakes have been made, as many opportunities have been lost, as many chances, as many failures to do what needed to be done have happened. And the same thing you can say with the economic war, which economic war, military war, it's the two sides of the same coin. You can tell exactly how the Donbass war is going by looking at the exchange rate between the Russian ruble and the US dollar.
Good point.
And the more rubles it takes to buy the US dollar, the less Russia is winning. And at the same time, it's bad. The Russians left 300 billion US dollars in foreign exchange and gold reserves in other countries that has now been frozen by those enemy countries.
Right.
And the Russian central bank, instead of saying, if they owe Canada $50 million for, I don't know, whatever, instead of saying, okay, we'll go ahead and take it out of that 300 billion that's frozen there in Canada, they go ahead and pay it, And so the economic war and the military war have both had terrible shortcomings, mistakes, and failures, and again, to the point where you have to ask, is it possible for anyone to be this stupid, or are they doing it on purpose? But in the diplomatic front, the treaties that Russia has signed, particularly, over the last 20 years, you can't name one where they didn't get just completely screwed to the floor. And so now there's talk, in the fall, we're going to have peace negotiations, and we'll just take Zaporozhye and Lugansk and Donetsk and Kherson oblasts, and then we'll make the peace. And that's not the peace. That's the humiliating defeat. And
it still doesn't solve the problem, Russell. This is the argument that I keep making, and I would think you're going to agree, is that the problem has always been the Nazis, the Ukrainian nationalists, and they're not going to give up.
I don't agree. It's not the Ukrainian Nazis. It's the American and European Nazis.
Yes, and we're backing the Ukrainian ones.
Here it is right here.
Yes.
This whole war, it's not Ukraine against Russia. It's not even NATO against Russia. This war is the war of the parasite class, the global parasite class, against humanity. That's exactly what it is. Donbass and Syria, those are the spear point. Yemen, there's a few other places, Yemen being one of them. Palestine as always, but it's the parasite class. Anyone at this point that doesn't understand that there's a real depopulation project in effect right now, by this time, if they don't understand that, then they're not really educated enough to have an opinion or be qualified to have an opinion, because it's so obvious, the whole thing, the destruction of the food sources, the whole thing with the the shot, which I guess we can say since we're not on YouTube anymore.
Yep,
but
you can talk about it now. We're off YouTube.
That's the thing. I mean, anyone that doesn't understand at this point that the vaccine was an intentional poisoning of this generation and future generations, it's like, how can you kid yourself? I mean, the dude, like last week, he was 30 years old, big bodybuilder, some dude. He took 4 shots and he kicked over. He died from a heart attack at 30 years old. Mr. Health Nut. How many soccer players and elite athletes just kicked over because of that? And so obviously that's a deal. The war here, the war of attrition.
Oh my God, it's depopulating Ukraine, and a whole generation of Ukrainians are dying.
It's the generation and all future generations.
Right.
And it's so at this point it becomes clear, and the billionaires in Russia are as much the enemies of humanity as the billionaires in America, in London, in China, in South Africa, anywhere. I'm a Russian Orthodox Christian and a communist too, but I'll tell you that the love of money is the root of all evil. It's funny the way that it's actually a verse from the Bible, the words of Jesus Christ, and it gets shortened and changed around a lot in English, and you hear it all the time. Oh, money is the root of all evil. And that's not what he said. He said the love of money is the root of all evil. And indeed it is. And the people today in Russia that are making money off of this war, they're the biggest enemy of the Russian people is the oligarchs and parasites in Moscow today. And I mean that. And they're the enemies of the future of humanity. And it's not necessarily very safe for me to say that, but
yeah, I was going to say, be careful, because I know there are laws in Russia.
It is the truth. And I've said since
what you're saying is true. And also I wanted to ask you as a communist, because I know that the communist movement, there is great division among communists, particularly in Europe, that, for example, in Russia, the Communist Party is the second biggest party in Russia and generally supports Putin, generally is not opposing him anyway. But there are communist parties in other parts of the world who do not support Russia in this conflict because they view this as an imperialist war between two imperialist powers, imperialist Russia versus imperialist NATO countries. And so I wanted to ask your thoughts on that, Russell.
Okay, well, of course we can answer that very quickly and easily. And if Russia is an imperialist power, name all the countries that Russia has invaded
there you go.
in the 21st century or in the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And yet, as you say, there is certainly a oligarch class that is in charge in Russia, certainly a capitalist class.
Very much so, and
there are war profiteers there too, just like there are
very, very much so. And
that's just real talk. There are a lot of people out there who are fanboys for Russia.
Exactly.
I know
it's
you're
the
not.
Elephant in the room.
Right. And I know you have to be careful what you say, and I don't want to get you in trouble.
Well,
I'm
not the kind of guy that's careful about what I say. I say what I think.
That's why we
don't care who likes it or not. But I'll tell you this: this is something that's well worth understanding. First of all, in this war, it is the war between the oligarch, parasite, billionaire class and humanity. They are right now, all the billionaires on earth, they have their own deal going, and they're working to get rid of about 90% of us, make the rest into sex slaves, to organ donors, to whatever, for dinner, you know? And so every billionaire on this planet is a thief. No one can work hard enough to actually earn $1 billion, which is $1,000 million. No one, I mean, I used to be a tree trimmer, you know, and I made $50,000 a year. I made $1,000 every Friday afternoon. And to do that work, I had to risk my life. It is the most dangerous job in the United States, by the way, if you care to look that up. It is the most dangerous job. It takes courage. You know, actually, human beings are born with 2 instinctive fears, one of which is the fear of falling. So to be able to overcome the fear of falling, you're able to overcome any other fear, because all other fears besides the fear of falling and the fear of sudden loud noises is the other instinctive fear. So it takes courage. It takes physical strength, tremendous physical strength. You know, back in, 20 years ago, I was like Tarzan, man. I was like Johnny Weissmuller. I was swinging through trees with a chainsaw, and also it takes real skill. It takes the ability to think in 3 dimensions. We weren't like just cutting down forests. We were cutting down big trees in between houses, where I had to put each little piece, in between a couple of meters. And I made $50,000 a year doing that. So what billionaire, who Bill Gates or Elon Musk or anybody else, how smart do they have to be? How tough do they have to be? How hard do they have to work to make, 200,000 times more than I did doing that kind of work? So, every billionaire is a thief. You can make $1 billion by stealing it or by scamming it somehow, but you can't make it by working, by earning it. And so, here's the thing. It's very interesting. From the beginning of 2022, the beginning of the special military operation, to the beginning of 2023, according to Forbes magazine, Russia had 22 new billionaires in 1 year. They went from 188 billionaires to 210. In the time of war, in the time of, when people are, grannies are sewing socks for the soldiers at the front, guys are taking, collections to make, to buy some gloves or flashlights or a drone or whatever, for the soldiers on the front. 22 new billionaires. So of the 210 billionaires in Russia, their collective wealth increased by 150 billion in just that 1 year, from 22 to 23.
And then there are the lower level grifters too, not just the big oligarchs.
Listen, that's not their total collective wealth. That's how much it increased in 1 year.
Jeez.
And that's $150 billion. And understand that the entire military budget for the Russian Federation, do you know what it is annually?
No idea.
75 billion. So these billionaire parasites increased their wealth by the amount that was 2 years of the whole military budget of the Russian Federation, $75 billion. Do you know how much the U.S. military budget is?
I've lost track, hon. A long time ago.
It's around 800 billion.
About 800 billion.
More than 10 times as big as the Russian military budget.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just the U.S., not NATO, just the U.S. So, I mean, you see there when these kind of parasites, you know, they make money on war, and so they want the war to continue. I mean, there's a reason that, you know, the railroad bridges across the Dnieper River have not been blown up. And that's the main way of transporting soldiers, ammo, equipment, everything.
That question has crossed my mind too, Russell.
Well, it's crossed a lot of people's mind here. And
I
those
would think
bridges
so.
are still there.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that they're still there is because $700 million a month worth of Russian products
Right.
go west across those bridges to Europe. And so, again, the parasite class that's making the money, you know, they're the ones that are saying, no, we can't blow these bridges. We'll send in another battalion of guys to defend the front. But just because those trains that go west with our, whatever, our samovars or whatever it is the Russians are selling. I mean, and this $700 million a month does not include in any way the gas or oil. I'm not talking about petroleum. I'm talking about just like regular products, shirts or matches or whatever that are made here that are sold there,
Yeah.
And so the biggest danger to the Russian hope for victory in this war against 21st century fascism is the parasites and collaborators in Moscow. And I'm not saying that Vladimir Putin is one of them.
Right, but you're saying he needs to clean his own house. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying that he is one of them. I am not saying that he is controlled by them. I don't believe that at all, and I'm not saying it. But it's beyond question that obviously he does not control them, and he needs to take control of them. I mean,
well, it just gives the West more reasons to criticize him.
Humanity.
Yeah.
And so, and definitely for the future survival of Russia. I mean, Russia, Yugoslavia at one time was one of the most successful Eastern Bloc, post-Soviet countries. And I mean, Libya at one time was the most successful country in Africa with the highest standard of living. I mean, so the danger is real. Russia stands as the biggest obstacle to what the 21st century Nazis want to do. And yet there's people in Russia that are hobbling that resistance, and particularly in Moscow. I mean, so again, that's why I'm a communist, because I understand that, it's really, it all boils down to a class struggle in the end.
That's right.
And I want to tell you that I don't know if you saw, but the first time I ever voted for president in 1988, I voted for Ron Paul.
Ron Paul, my guy. Yeah.
88.
That's right. His first.
The last time that I voted was in 2000. I voted for Ralph Nader for the Green Party.
Right.
And then after that election, I understood that, voting in the United States, the U.S. election system is completely rigged, and I understand. And RFK Jr. is a charismatic guy, but he's not going to change anything. Voting in the United States is a game for suckers. Anybody that.
You know what Mark Twain said about voting a long, long time ago, don't you?
Yes, of course I do. And it's true. And what he said, it's like, if it changed anything, they wouldn't let you do it. It's rigged from the get-go. The way that I mean, and I voted in 2000, and then I saw, Bush rigged the election, stole it from Gore, who wouldn't have been any better than Bush.
Yeah,
He was a real scumbag
two wings, same bird.
Yeah, but voting in the United States, it's like a form of political masturbation. It feels good for a minute, but it doesn't change anything. It's a complete fantasy. And in the end, it just leaves a mess that somebody has to clean up.
So speaking of messes that need to be cleaned up, getting back to that East-West separation, that division in Ukraine, I think what a lot of our Western viewers don't know or don't understand is that the Western part of Ukraine, of course, is where that's the hotbed of Ukrainian nationalism, and they tend to be more European in their ways, consider themselves to be Europeans. And the eastern part of Ukraine, that's Soviet country, and it still remains to this day still a very
the eastern part of Ukraine, the Donbas region, which includes parts of southern Russia, including Rostov, Taganrog. There's a poster that was published 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, 1921, right after the Civil War. And it was a map of Donbass, of southern Russia and eastern Ukraine. And it said, Donbass, Serce Russia. Donbass is the heart of Russia. And this is from 1921. This is in the days of the Soviet Union. And it didn't say Donbass is the heart of Ukraine. It didn't say Donbass is the heart of the Soviet Union. It said Donbass is the heart of Russia.
I've seen that. And that was like 1921 during that very short-lived period of Ukrainian independence. Very short-lived.
That's right. Well, I mean, during the Civil War, there was a dozen different people's republics here.
That's right.
Basically literally. In Donetsk Oblast. Mariupol was called Makhnovia after this anarchist guy, Nestor Makhno. It was, it's an interesting place. It's had some tough times, but it's got some glorious history too.
And speaking of history, we've talked quite a bit about the Nazi problem, but to make it a little more contemporary, I know you've been there for about a decade now, getting close to 10 years. You've seen it from the ground. How widespread is fascism in Ukraine today?
It's so it's like today, the big news today that the Turkey has released these Azov Nazis that Russia traded for Medvedchuk. Okay, so here's the thing about Nazis. The really hardcore Nazis, they're the same as like ISIS terrorists. These are guys that can, cut your face off with a knife and laugh about it, and make a video about it and put it on TikTok or something,
which they routinely do.
Can slaughter children in front of their mother and think nothing of it. They can do it all day long, every day. You understand, you think about, they say, how long it takes to train a pilot for an F-16 or something. But think how long it takes to train someone that can butcher little children, to totally remove their humanity, to make them, so brutal that they look at, another human being as like you look at a fried chicken or something,
Turns my stomach.
And that's the dudes that just got released. And that's why they're so important to the Nazis in Ukraine and their masters, the Nazis in Washington, D.C., and London and Brussels and Tel Aviv. It's because these people, they're absolute psychopaths.
That's right.
You say, okay, go run over everybody in this town with a steamroller. Okay, no problem. Line
And
them
they
up.
take great pleasure in it if they're Russian. Gives them a thrill.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's like somebody that's a psychopath like that, they don't care who it is. The same guys that are willing, that are that murdered the Russian prisoners of war, the well-known videos that were made where they were kneecapping guys or shooting them in the crotch, letting them bleed out, beating them up while they're dying. They'll kill Russian prisoners of war, or they'll go kill civilians in Bucha. They say, oh, some civilian with a white armband, pop, 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 just go ahead and gun them down. Oh, they got a Russian C ration food carton, bam, bam, bam. They took food from the Russians, kill them. And these are the same ones that, and they're not the frontline troops. They're the guys behind the frontline troops. They're the blocking troops. They take the conscripts and they say, okay, you go to the front line and you stay there and don't come back. Because if you come back, we're going to shoot you. They shoot their own guys. There was a video I saw last week, some battalion commander, he went to the front. There was a bunch of guys on the front line in a bunker. And the commander says, all right, we're going, we're going to go on the attack or something. And the guy said, no, we're not going. And he's like, yeah, I order you to go. And they're like, get out of here. And you could hear like somebody cocking their AK. And the battalion commander, he walks outside. He tells his assistant, give me a grenade. And he throws a grenade in there in the bunker with, half a dozen dudes or something like in that. His own guys, kills them. And that's the thing. They don't care who it is. Once you acquire the taste for blood, you don't care who it is.
It's sometimes I think that their Russophobia is really just an excuse to kill, just as the Nazis used communism as an excuse to take pleasure in killing everybody in sight. It was just the thrill of the kill, more than it was political ideology or racial hatred or religious hatred. They just like to kill people. They're psychos, like you said.
It's like from that book, 1984 by George Orwell, there's the classic line about power. And when O'Brien has Winston Smith strapped down to the chair in room 101 at the end, and he asks Winston, he says, how does one man exert power over another man? And Winston knew the answer. He said, by making him suffer. So every time you hear about a powerful billionaire, a powerful oligarch, or a powerful politician, just remember that's the definition of power.
That's right. And, of course, here in the West, that's the reason I'm off YouTube right now, probably. I am frequently accused of being a Putin puppet, a Putin stooge, a pro-Russian mouthpiece. Now, I do support Russia in this conflict, but I'm not one of those fangirls who says that everything Russia does is great or Putin's the greatest thing ever. And we do have a lot of those in the West, and I think some of them are frankly running a very good grift. I'm not going to name any names. I think you know who I'm talking about. And, they're selling a vision or a version of Russia that honestly is a lot of propaganda. I don't believe a lot of that. I'm trying to be honest with my audience. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because you're not a bullshitter and you're not a Russian fanboy. You are very sober in your analysis and you know what's going on because you're actually there. a lot of these pundits over here in the West, I call them the Putin fanboys, they're not there. They're sitting over here in the United States, literally reading headlines off RT and making a pretty good
and then
grift off
giving their
of it.
opinions. And
So I just want to say I'm not so much pro Russia as I am anti-Nazi, and that's the way I felt about it in World War II.
I'm a citizen of the Russian Federation. I have a Russian passport. I'm very happy and proud about that fact. But my deepest loyalty, the reason I came here was to help the people of Donbass, and I mean, like I said, Donbass is the heart of Russia. The people here are unique. They are sacred. They have courage and the willingness to self-sacrifice, to work hard. That is an example for the world. I mean,
Absolutely.
there may be other people, around the world, Vietnamese, Cubans, Hezbollah, perhaps, but the people here are very special. And, my first loyalty, my heart is with them, and it's like where I live, where my wife and I have a house in the Petrovsky district. That's like, the toughest, poorest, most bombs district of the whole city of Donetsk. And I'm proud to be from there. I mean, it's, the salt of the earth,
Yes,
exactly. Yes. People come from there. And, I love Russia. I have defended it. Everyone here in Donetsk has defended Russia for almost 10 years now. And it's not, and we're very glad that the Russians came in when they did, because the Ukrainian and NATO Nazis were getting ready to make a major offensive and Rwanda-style genocide. Yes. And so we're very glad that the Russians came in when they did. But before they came in, for 8 years before that, we defended Russia. And it's, Russia has yet to pay us back in the way that we deserve. And the best way to do that, of course, is to get the Ukrainian army far enough away where they can't bomb our city every day like they do right now.
That's right. Which leads me to ask the obvious question. I know you're in a war zone, but what's going on right there in Donetsk lately where you live?
Well, okay, so our house is in Petrovsky district. That's about 7 kilometers from the Ukrainian positions in Mariinka. We have not lived in our house for about the last year because of very heavy shelling. Our house has been damaged 3 different times by artillery shells, not direct hits, but shells that, heavy 155, HIMARS, 152, very heavy artillery. It's landed in all directions around our house within 100 meters. Wow. Just the shock wave, can break the siding off your house. And we've had shrapnel come through the roof, come through windows, stuff like that, So we are staying right now in an apartment in the center of the city, which is, also under heavy shelling, but not as bad as in Petrovsky district, So I go to Petrovsky, every day or every other day. We have a couple of cats there. I go to feed the cats, check the house, check the neighbors. We've had two neighbors have been killed within a couple of 100 meters of our house, people that we knew. Yeah. So, it's no joke. It's a serious situation. And
I can't imagine.
It's a miracle that the people here still can stand it.
Yes.
It's 10 years of real war here. And, people, they say, oh, it's a post-traumatic stress or something. No, it's not post because it's still going on every day,
Right. Right. It's been constant bombardment for a decade, damn near. They're the toughest people in the world, the strongest people in the world, and I'm constantly amazed, and I'm amazed by how resolute and calm you are, of course, in the midst of all of this. I know you've got a family too that you have to protect and keep calm, and cats. But I was
Yeah.
curious to ask if you could confirm this for me, since your home has actually been damaged. I'm told that the Russian government is offering free replacement housing to people in the war zone whose homes have been irreparably damaged.
Well, it's
Is that true?
actually it's kind of that's a contentious subject because they're offering it. I mean, let me put it this way. Yes, they are, and they're giving it to people. It's not quite on an equitable level. Some people get more, some people get less. It's like the rebuilding of Mariupol.
Right.
Russia has put huge amounts of work and effort and money into rebuilding Mariupol. I mean, it really was. It was like an Armageddon style. The whole city was looked like Stalingrad or something. In the a year ago when I was there, I was going there even before the fighting stopped, and it was tough. But I mean, so now they have new housing, Mariupol, a new hospital, la la la. But the people in Donetsk are still waiting for a lot of stuff that other people have gotten, and understand that, 2 years ago, everybody in Mariupol was on the Ukrainian side, whether they liked it or not. That's where they were, and the people here in Donetsk have been on the Russian side since 2014. And the people here, sometimes they ask what the hell's going on? They're building new apartments for the Ukrops in Mariupol. And I'll tell you, I went there, and even before the fighting stopped, I was interviewing people that were standing in line for Russian human aid. And I had some hipster chick tell me, Slava Geroyam, Slava Bandera type stuff,
Wow.
And this is why she's waiting in line to get some human aid from Russia. But I mean, a lot of people are, they're just, they're stupid, or they're confused, or, they don't really know what's going on, and they just,
Girls got to eat, right?
Well,
I guess she had to eat that food, no matter where it came from. So I've got one last burning question on my mind, Russell, because I know that you've been a long time cannabis legalization activist. I know that you have unfortunately been prosecuted by the United States for growing this medicinal plant, this herb, and that the government gave you one hell of a hard time. So, of course, I know that marijuana is illegal over there in Russia. Do you still smoke weed? Can you smoke weed over there?
Well, I'll tell you that when I came here, I figured that I was never going to smoke weed again. And that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for where I live now and what I do now and who I'm with now. It's a fact that, in ancient history, the people of the Donbass region were called Scythians.
Scythians?
And 1,000, 2,000 years ago, they were known for putting cannabis plants on the fire inside of a tent, a sauna type deal. And
Interesting.
being very fond of that, so,
Hmm.
it's
Well, it's
not,
good
I mean,
farming country.
when I came here, I thought that, nobody ever even heard of weed here, but
Oh, I'm sure they
apparently
have.
way back in history, somebody did hear about it once back then.
Do you think that Russia will ever legalize it or decriminalize it? Or is that just a hard no in Russia?
I think that's going to be a lot tougher than it was in the United States. First of all, I am one of the guys that helped legalize weed, helped change the law. I worked for from 1990 till 2000 as one of the national level legalization activists. I was friends with Jack Harrer and Dennis Perone, Chris Conrad, Willie Nelson. Back then when it was changing, and I'm one of the guys that helped change it. I'm very proud of that because, you can ask an American citizen, when's the last time the U.S. government ever did anything that made life better for regular people?
Amen.
And, you can say, and if you can think of anything, it's going to be, well, they legalized weed,
Yeah.
It's like about
someday,
the only
maybe.
thing. Well,
maybe.
I mean, and now, of course, you see that
States are doing it.
and understand that it's interesting. Even back then in the 90s, dude, I'm talking about 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. George Soros was a big funder of the weed legalization movement.
That is true.
And I know. And as you see it now, I mean, it's like the internet, which you could say also might have been something that the United States government did that improved the lives of people. But, they did it and then they took it over and they, turned it back to crap. I mean, it's like the internet now, it's a surveillance tool. It's a propaganda tool.
Right.
It's a censorship tool. And
we just found out tonight on this show, once again.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I mean, I remember the days when, it was, AOL and dial up. It took 5 minutes to download a black and white picture.
That's right.
And I saw the potential that it had back then. And, for a while there, it was really great. It was the information version of the Wild West.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's taken over by corporations. And just like with,
and
the weed situation, when I was working to legalize weed, I said I want it to be legal like corn. When anybody can grow or have or consume as much as they want, and sell as much as they want, stuff like that. But, and of course, I'm very, very much against any hard drugs. Weed is completely different. I mean, weed is less dangerous than booze or tobacco or heroin or, meth or whatever else you can say. So weed's in a separate class. I'm only talking about weed. And,
I just want to point out, because I think a lot of our viewers don't know this about you, but you ran for United States Senate for the state of Minnesota in 1990, was it? With a party called the Grassroots Party. And your whole platform was the legalization of marijuana, cannabis.
That is right.
And you had like a really tiny budget, but you did super well in the election. How many votes did you get?
I got 30,000 votes, which is about 1.5%. I spent about $300 on my whole campaign. So I spent a penny a vote. The Republican incumbent, Rudy Boschwitz, spent $6 a vote, and he lost. And Paul Wellstone, who was the last honorable man to ever step into the United States Senate, he won. He spent $1 a vote. And he got more votes than the Republican incumbent.
And that was around the same time that Governor or Jesse Ventura ran for governor and actually won as an independent.
Actually, yes. That was some years. That was about 8 years before Ventura ran
Yeah.
for
So there was
the
always that
governor of
independent
Minnesota
movement up there in Minnesota that
and
was so
won.
strong.
Well, it's Minnesota is a really cool state, man.
It is. Love
It's
it.
highly
more than anything.
educated. It's very Scandinavian influenced. People there are smart. They look out for each other. And I mean, I lived there for 7 years and I really loved it.
Oh, yeah. If it wasn't for the cold, I'd love to live there too, but I'm just too much of a Texan. I can't handle the cold. You're handling it pretty well. You're over there where it gets real damn cold. How's that for a South Texas boy? How do you?
It's free air conditioning, man. I love it.
That's awesome. Well, Russell, we're just about out of time, but I wanted to thank you for joining us. And please tell folks where they can find you, where they can follow you, and where they can support you.
Okay, thanks, Laurie. Like I said, excuse me.
That's okay. Happens to the best of us.
Yeah. I've been deleted from YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and la. So I'm on Telegram, which is an excellent platform for finding alternative news. It's like the Russian version of Twitter. I'm also on VKontakte, which is VK. It's like the Russian version of Facebook. Has 600 or 800 million subscribers, many of them in English. Both Telegram and VKontakte can be translated into English. I mean, it's time for people to understand that if they want to find the truth, they have to do a little work. It's not a free deal. There's a lot of people out there that want to hide the truth. They want to, distort the truth. So if you want to find the real truth, you have to do a little work. I recommend Telegram and VKontakte highly. You can find a lot of stuff there that you'll not find anywhere
you said they have
else.
the translate tool, and you got me curious because I couldn't find a translate tool. They finally built a translate tool onto VK for English.
Yeah. Or actually, on VK, what I do, I mean, I use the any basic whatever browser you use.
Yeah.
You can add on there. It'll translate into English. The whole page right there.
Okay, so it's not actually built into VK, but you can just use your browser's translate tool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and it's like that's what it is. You have to do a little work to find the gold.
I like it a lot better than Facebook. I just can't read or speak Russian. I can't read or write Russian worth a damn. So sometimes I'm a little lost on there.
The good thing about it is that there are good translating tools these days. Yeah. I mean, Facebook, it's just, I was on it for, 10, 12 years, but just, thinking of what it is now, the propaganda, the censorship. And I was on it till they kicked me off, so, it's not like I can say, oh, yes, I closed my Facebook account. No,
and they kicked me off for airing a speech
everything.
from Vladimir Putin. That's why they kicked me off. And just this week, Maverick News was suspended from Facebook after many years of broadcasting there, which is why we're not broadcasting live on Facebook tonight, right now. Normally we would be, but we are under a temporary ban, hopefully only temporary, on Facebook. But you know how it is, Russell. Once you get on their radar at these social media companies,
that's right.
You never get off the radar.
And you know what they say? FFB.
FFB? What does that mean? What is that? Tell me.
Okay, well, let me put it this way. The first F, then the second F is FB is Facebook. So F,
got
Facebook.
You. I thought I was looking for the FJB. F that guy too. Because you know who's behind so much of this censorship. And we now know because of the Facebook revelations that just came out this week, released by the judge and supporting documents for a censorship case, right? That the judge told the Biden administration they had to cease and desist and stop ordering these social media companies to censor individual Americans, right? And with that lawsuit, there were 25 pages of supporting documents submitted by the judge that showed a very clear pattern of White House officials in contact with people at Facebook, telling them what to do, bossing them around, telling them who to censor, what subjects and what particular keywords to strike people for. We also know from the Twitter files revelations from a few months ago. So all we're waiting for now is the YouTube files, because we know for certain that it's happening at Twitter and Facebook, and you know it's happening at YouTube as well. These orders come directly from the Biden administration and this White House.
Yeah, I mean, and that's my point. You know, I mean, why would you want to try and get information from a place like Facebook that you know beyond any question not only censors the truth and, you know, pushes down the truth, but then they promote, you know, complete BS. You know, they put the lies out there. Oh, you know, the vaccine won't hurt you.
And don't you dare say otherwise, or we will kick you off this platform, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, so that's why you gotta find alternative sources like Telegram and VContact.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Rumble. I want to thank everybody who's watching on Rumble tonight. Here lately, we actually have a lot more viewers usually watching on Rumble than YouTube nowadays, and that makes me very happy. I like to see people getting off these censorship platforms.
And each one of those people on Rumble that took the time and effort to make an account there, you know, you got to respect them, because that's the kind of work that you do to overcome censorship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks to everybody watching on Twitter. Thankfully, Twitter's probably the last social media platform we have that is still somewhat free. It's not perfect, but they do let us say things on Twitter now that were not allowed before.
Thanks to Elon Musk.
So thank you, Elon.
I hope he kicks Zuckerberg's ass if they ever get to that cage
Me
match.
too. I'm totally down for that. Russell, thanks for staying up late with us. It has been such a pleasure to get to know you finally. I felt like I know you just from being internet pen pals and following you for so many years, but we finally get to meet face to face, and it's just been a fantastic conversation.
It's a real pleasure for me too, Laurie. Thanks to you and the guys from Maverick Media. The truth is our most important weapon. Thanks to you guys that are working to get it out there in spite of all the obstacles. And, together we can make a better world for everybody. And that's the whole idea.
Peace. Love you, brother. Take care. Be safe.
Okay.
Good night.
In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.